You're listening to Short History Shorts Audio, where history speaks louder than images. The Numantine War, fought between the Roman Republic and the Celtiberian city of Numantia from 143 to 133 BC, was one of the most dramatic, stubborn, and symbolically powerful conflicts of Rome's expansion into the Iberian Peninsula. For the Romans, it was intended as the final act in decades of campaigning to bring Hispania under control after the Second Punic War. For the Celtiberians, it became a desperate struggle for independence and survival, with Numantia emerging as a rallying point for all those unwilling to bend the knee to Roman authority. Over 10 years, the conflict showcased the resilience of tribal resistance, the limits of Roman military power when facing determined guerrilla tactics, and the political instability in Rome that could undermine its war efforts. It ended not with battlefield defeat, but with mass starvation, suicide, and the obliteration of a city that became a legend. When the Second Punic War ended in 201 BC, Rome found itself the unplanned master of former Carthaginian territories in Hispania. These provinces, Hispania Citerior and Hispania Ulterior, were rich in resources, particularly silver, and strategically vital as a buffer against potential threats from Gaul or North Africa. Yet they were also inhabited by fiercely independent tribal peoples, Celtiberians, Lusitanians, and others who had never been under central control. Roman presence was initially thin, and administration was inconsistent, relying heavily on local cooperation and alliances. However, the greed of Roman governors, heavy tribute demands, and abuses against local communities sparked repeated revolts. The Celtiberians, occupying the rugged central highlands of the Meseta, were among the most warlike peoples Rome faced. Skilled in both infantry combat and mounted skirmishing, they excelled at hit-and-run warfare in terrain that negated Rome's traditional battlefield strengths. Even after decades of campaigning, Rome's control was tenuous outside fortified towns and key roads. By the mid-2nd century BC, the city of Numantia, in what is now Soria, Spain, stood out as a symbol of resistance, small, remote, but positioned perfectly to control access through the upper Duero River valley. The Numantine War grew out of the fallout from another rebellion, that of the Lusitanians under the charismatic leader Viriathus. Rome had struggled to suppress Viriathus for years, suffering repeated defeats at the hands of Iberian guerrillas. Although Viriathus was assassinated in 139 BC through Roman treachery, unrest spread eastward into Celtiberian lands. The spark came in 143 BC when the city of Segeda, an ally of Numantia, began fortifying itself in defiance of a treaty with Rome. Rome dispatched the consul Quintus Caecilius Metellus Macedonicus to enforce the treaty and demand the dismantling of the walls. When Segeda refused, war broke out, and its people fled to Numantia for protection. From the start, the war exposed a key challenge for Rome. While they could field large armies, they struggled in Hispania's geography. Numantia's defenders rarely offered pitched battles. Instead, they relied on ambushes, rapid raids, and retreating into their fortified city when threatened. Roman legions, trained for open-field engagements, found themselves chasing shadows through hills, forests, and rivers. Moreover, Roman political instability meant that each year a new commander took charge, eager for quick victories to advance his career, a recipe for short-term thinking and inconsistent strategy. In 142 BC, the consul Quintus Fabius Maximus Servilianus took command. Attempting to starve Numantia into submission, he instead found his supply lines harassed and his forces demoralized. The following year, Marcus Popilius Linus tried a more aggressive approach, but he too failed to take the city, suffering embarrassing losses in the surrounding countryside. One reason for Roman frustration was the skill of the Numantine warriors. These were not disorganized tribal levies. They were seasoned fighters, armed with short swords, javelins, and small round shields, perfectly suited for rapid, mobile strikes. They could melt away into the hills, then reappear miles away to ambush a Roman patrol. Even when vastly outnumbered, they inflicted disproportionate casualties. Roman morale sank as soldiers realized that victory often meant capturing empty farmland or chasing elusive enemies. The low point for Rome came in 137 BC under the consul Gaius Hostilius Mancinus. Attempting to besiege Numantia, Mancinus advanced too aggressively and soon found his forces surrounded and cut off from supplies. Realizing disaster was imminent, he sought terms with the Numantines. Here the young Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus, serving as questor, negotiated a treaty that allowed the Romans to withdraw in exchange for recognizing Numantia's independence. The Roman Senate, however, was outraged. Not only did they refuse to honor the treaty, but they sent Mancinus back to Numantia in chains to be handed over to the enemy as a symbolic repudiation. The Numantines, showing a certain grim honor, refused to accept him. They had made peace with Rome, not with an abandoned scapegoat. After the Mancinus debacle, Rome alternated between military offensives and half-hearted diplomacy. Commanders like Marcus Aemilius Lepidus Porcina attempted sieges but were hampered by supply shortages, troop mutinies and ongoing guerrilla attacks. Numantia, though small, perhaps only 4,000, 8,000 inhabitants, seemed invincible. Each Roman failure added to its legend and inspired other Celtiberian towns to resist. In 134 BC, the Roman Senate finally decided to send its most celebrated commander, Publius Cornelius Scipio Aemilianus, conqueror of Carthage in the Third Punic War. Scipio understood that Numantia could not be taken by reckless assaults or undermined by political turnover. Instead, he implemented a methodical, disciplined campaign. First, he reformed his army, rooting out corruption, forcing strict training, and instilling iron discipline. He also cut away any non-combat personnel, camp followers, or luxury comforts. His soldiers would live and fight like true campaigners. Rather than chase Numantine raiders, Scipio encircled the city with a network of 7 fortified camps connected by a continuous palisade and ditch. This siege ring, stretching some 9 kilometers, was reinforced with towers, river barriers and blockades to ensure nothing, not even a message, could enter or leave Numantia. The siege of Numantia lasted nearly a year, from late 134 to the summer of 133 BC. Inside the city, supplies dwindled as Roman forces intercepted all attempts at relief. The Numantines launched desperate sorties, sometimes breaking through Roman lines to seize food, but each attempt grew riskier as the blockade tightened. Hunger soon became famine. Famine became starvation. Accounts from later Roman historians describe scenes of horror, people boiling leather for soup, eating grass, even resorting to cannibalism. Disease spread in the cramped, weakened population. By the summer of 133 BC, resistance was no longer possible. Facing inevitable defeat, many Numantines chose suicide over enslavement. Families set their homes ablaze, killing themselves inside. Warriors destroyed weapons to deny them to the enemy. When the Romans finally entered, they found only corpses and a handful of survivors too weak to resist. The city was razed to the ground, its territory annexed into the Roman province. The fall of Numantia marked the end of organized Celtiberian resistance for a time, though guerrilla warfare and sporadic revolts continued in Hispania for decades. For Rome, it was a costly victory. 10 years of war against a city that, at its height, may have fielded fewer than 10,000 warriors. The Numantine War entered Roman political memory as a lesson in patience, discipline, and the dangers of underestimating a determined foe. For the peoples of Spain, Numantia became a symbol of defiance. Centuries later, Spanish nationalists and poets would invoke its name as the ultimate expression of sacrifice for freedom. Even today, Numantia stands in Iberian historical memory as the city that would not surrender, a testament to the fact that sometimes, even in defeat, a people can win immortality.